in Africa, so he understands the ministry of compassion. He's going to talk for a very short time. The players aren't here anyway. They're getting their act together and getting prepared to come on up here. So Palmer, share with us for just a few minutes about compassion before the players and for Matthew. All right?
Well, thank you. It's incredible to be here with you. As John said, I'm a writer and a speaker, and I help lead a church in Arizona, but what I'm most about is trying to convince people that this world is a broken place. But it doesn't have to be that way, because God wants to use your one and your very important life to change that. And it's an honor to represent compassion because, like John said, I've spent about half my life in Africa. My father was from San Jose, here just down the road. He owned pear orchards in Santa Clara, and then when he was in his early 40s, he met a young African pastor who said, "Jack, I need you in Africa to help our people grow food more efficiently. I need you to train pastors." So he moved our whole family to Liberia, West Africa. I was just a little guy. I have 6 brothers and sisters, and a single-engine prop plane dropped us off in the world's thickest rainforest in a small clearing. Our home was a bamboo mat house. My pet was a chimpanzee named Jimbo. And all of my friends ran barefoot when we played soccer, and they called me Yomplu. Yomplu means white spirit. And I would say, "I'm not a white spirit, you know?" And they'd say, "Palmer, but you're so white. Look at you. You look like a spirit." Well, you know, what do you do with that? They say over the course of our lives, we have 5 or 6 transforming moments, moments that change us forever. I had one of those moments when I was a high schooler in Africa. My twin brother and I were living in the capital city of Monrovia, and we're on our way to a Bible study on a Wednesday night in the back of a minivan when all of a sudden this small sedan taxi in front of us, jammed with about 7 or 8 people, hits a mound of dirt, flips, hits a steel telephone pole, and rolls. And so I jumped towards the door and thinking the guy driving would stop, but he keeps going. So I'm yelling, everyone's yelling, "Mike, did you see the accident?" And we knew he could help because he had been a paramedic in Minnesota before he came to Africa, but he just keeps driving. So now everyone's yelling, "Mike, stop the van." And he won't even acknowledge us. So finally we give up. A few minutes later, we pull into the house where the Bible study is, and Mike puts the van in park, and then he turns to us, and he calmly says, "Hey, I saw the accident, but," he said, "I knew if I stopped, I'd have to give someone mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and tonight I don't feel like giving anyone mouth-to-mouth resuscitation." I was only a high schooler, but I was disgusted. Do you see the irony of how we're on our way to a Bible study to sing songs about Jesus and pray to God, and we don't stop for the people who are desperate on the side of the road? I was only 17 years old, but that night before I got out of that van, I prayed this really short prayer. I said, "God, I will do all I can to live differently." And so I've spent my life and my ministry, my writing, trying to convince people that God can use your life to change what's not right in this world. Jesus used to tell stories just like the one that happened to me in Africa. In Luke 10, remember, he talks about a guy on the side of the road. We call it the story of the Good Samaritan. I think a better name is the story of bad religion, because he talks about 2 people who walk by and around a man. One is a priest. He's like the pastors and the theologians of our day, and that's who I am. The other is the Levite, who's like the Christian who's grown up in church, never missed a Sunday school class, leads a small group, and hands out bulletins on Sunday morning, and they walk by on the other side. And Jesus's point is, that kind of religion is kind of messed up. Do you see how Jesus draws a straight line from our spirituality to what we do or do not do about issues of justice and compassion? My friend Leland has written lyrics to a song that sing, "I will follow you into the homes of the broken." I thought a lot about those songs, those words, just a few weeks ago. I was in Uganda, Kampala. I was taking 120 people from my church, The Grove, to Malawi. And I was in Kampala, and I asked to visit the Compassion Child that my wife, Veronica, and I sponsor and we love. And so our host drove us to Nsamba, which is Kampala's most notorious slum. And we met Aisha, who we sponsor, and her mother. And then her mother said, "Would you come to our our home. And so we walked to her home, and it's just this small mud brick building with a dirt floor and a small door. And I follow her inside. It's no bigger than this stage. And when I sat down, I saw that my friend John Lott, who was with me, hadn't followed me in. I said, John, you have to come in. And John said, Palmer, I don't think I can fit through the door. The door was only this big. You see, John has been a strength and conditioning coach in the NFL for the last 15 years. I got to know him when he was with the Cardinals. And he's a former O lineman. So he's like 6'3" with these big old broad shoulders. I said, John, you've got to come in. I'm going to pull you in. And so I hauled him inside, and he fit through the door, and we visited with Aisha and her mother and her little brothers. And after we left, John said, man, that house is no bigger than the sheds we park our lawnmowers in down in Texas. And why did I insist that John come inside? Because the experience changes us. When we walk into the homes of the broken, we get involved in their lives, the experience changes us, and God opens our eyes to the things that we can do. I think there's a lot of Christians who are willing to follow Jesus into an air-conditioned church or into a living room small group, but how many Christians are actually willing to follow Jesus into the inner city slums or into the blighted neighborhoods or into the shanty towns of Africa? But when we do, it changes something in us, something in our soul. And it opens our eyes to the fact that we can make a difference in the life of one small child, a 5-year-old girl. We can change the circumstances of one family. I got to visit Aisha's school that Compassion is putting her in. It's beautiful. I got to visit the church where she has an after-school program where they have it for all the Compassion kids in the neighborhood. And it's beautiful. And you realize that what I do every month does that? You wouldn't believe that. They say, Jeffrey Sachs, some say, is the most brilliant man in the world. He's a Harvard economist. He said by the year 2025, we can end extreme poverty. And when I hear that, I wonder, why aren't preachers shouting that from their pulpits? But he says this, we need more hoses on the fire. If all of us come together, we can make a difference, and we can put out the fires, and we can end extreme poverty, and we can change communities, and we can change nations. And I just want to remind you today as I finish that now is the time to start doing that. Many of us have had good intentions for a long time. I'll end with this. I was doing a wedding for 2 Taylor University students, and I had all the groomsmen in the back room, and I was about to pray with them before I did the ceremony. And one of the groomsmen, they were all football players, and they said, could we recite something we recite before every football game? And I said, sure. And so they recited it, and it was pretty awesome. And so I had one of them write it on a napkin at the reception. We could call it a poem, but they were football players, so we're just going to call it words that go together. But here's what they said. They said, it's titled, What Will Today Bring? This is the beginning of a new day. God has given me this day to use as I will. I can waste it or I can use it for good. Because what I do today is important. I'm exchanging a day of my life for it. When tomorrow comes, this day will be gone forever. Leaving in its place something I traded for it. I want it to be gain, not loss. Good, not evil. Success, not failure. In order that I never regret the price I paid for today. Because today, God wants to use your life to do something beautiful and good. It's just like the words to one of my favorite Matthew West songs. The song is Do Something. And he sings this, if not you and me, then who? If not now, then when? And so maybe you didn't come here today thinking about sponsoring a child in Africa. I want to challenge you to do that. We have volunteers, and I want you to pray about it right now. You have a few minutes, there's not a rush, but we have volunteers in blue vests that say Compassion, and they have packets that represent a child. Could I ask, we have 200 packets, could I ask if 200 of you, if every one of you here would consider taking one of those packets and just read the profile. And I believe God's going to do something in your heart. And then if you're willing to sponsor a child, fill it out. You can give it back to one of the volunteers in the blue vest, or there's a Compassion table right here to my right. You can hold on to that packet this afternoon. Don't take it home with you. It represents the life of a child. But could I ask all of you, they're going to start coming through the crowd right now, and could I ask you to just raise your hand and they'll give you one, read the profile of a girl or a boy like this child I sponsor named Aisha. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you for giving me your attention. It means the world.